Good afternoon. So, data shows funding for women and people of color has taken a hit this year. So Tatiana, what's been your experience raising money during a bear market?
It's a very good question, thank you. So it's the discussion around gender equality and underrepresented founders is always a little difficult because each time in function of your culture, in function of your parents, in function of your husband, you have a different type of advice. So the thing that we're very focused on at Sista is data. Just to give you a slight point of view, because I'm from France, so in France, last year, in the total funding, there was only 1% of the venture funding that went to women-led startups. So 1% is, of course, less than a tip. It's not a lot. Their experience, I was a founder for 15 years in the tech industry, and we were lucky enough with my founder to sell our first company to Amazon. So at that point, we had a good experience with raising, but if you are not a serial entrepreneur, it's terrible. And as a funder now, because I just launched the SISTAFUND, so the idea is that we launched a fund that aims to raise 100 million. We did a first close 2 weeks ago of 30 million. And it was, of course, it's difficult like any fundraising, especially for a first-time fund, first-time team. But at the same time, I think that the French ecosystem, the European ecosystem is ready for that type of venture. And I feel that it was easier than it would have been a few years ago.
Tell me a bit more about the fund and what was your motivation behind setting up SISTAFUND?
So as I was saying, I was a founder from 2008, I launched my first company until 2022. And I guess that I always had the same absurd question around the fact that women weren't ambitious enough, around the fact that they lacked of competence. And I was surrounded by incredible women, incredible, ambitious, balanced team also. And I decided at one point to just seize the opportunity and not see it as a challenge, just saying there's an underserved industry. How do I take this opportunity and prove that women-led startup and gender-balanced team are, of course, 100% performance and not just charity, I guess.
Absolutely. So, Jesse, other side of the Atlantic, during the pandemic, you wrote a post saying, investing in women isn't an effing charity. Talk us through your experience negotiating in boardrooms.
You said that so kindly. I used the real F word and I apologize. My grandmother would be very upset with me. But I think it was out of a moment of frustration, and we're going into our third venture fund now. And I was just, the first fund, I mean, people were literally laughing me out of the room saying, women aren't even starting companies, what are you talking about? And I'd say things like, we saw 10,000 deals last year, like there's no issue here. But I think it came out of this moment of frustration where women are put in this bucket of impact, of charity, where I was getting a lot, I pitched about 500 potential investors, closed 85, and a lot of them were like, oh, I feel good about this because it's like charity. It's sort of like this, it's the impact play, and I think those words are not helpful to female women in business, period.
Absolutely. So you mentioned just like being put in these buckets. So what is this impact of when women founded businesses and startups founded by people of color, when they're sort of lumped into these ESG budgets? What does that mean when they're sort of taken out of the main budget?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, I have actually more recently fundraising for our third fund. It's been interesting because the first time around, people are laughing me out of the room, like I was mentioning, and this time they're like, we have entire buckets of money dedicated to this, but then I find out that it's like negative 1% of the billions that they're managing, and they're kind of just checking a box. And something I think would be really helpful is if we added a level of transparency to all of the institutions where the funding was going in terms of women and diversity. It's something that we track, and I was mentioning before, but I'm part of this organization in Los Angeles called Pledge LA that the mayor started with all the VC funds in Los Angeles. And it means that we track all of the data on just what's going on in our companies, how many women are there, how much diversity, what that looks like. We put it in our annual reports, and that's something that I would recommend the institutions do as well. And I'm talking about the endowments and pension funds and the larger capital.
Absolutely. So, Tatiana, when I speak to a lot of founders, they talk about this old boys network. So, with regards to who gets funding, what's worked for you when you approach VCs?
So I think that the important thing about network is that you need to build it when you don't need it. It's really essential, because at one point, if you're going to ask something to someone that you just met, it's not going to be very efficient. If you have the network for several years, you don't really know how you're going to use it, but one day you can, of course, send an email and it will be easier. So the first thing is building a network very, very early. And I think that I did it as a founder, and I did it also as a VC. Because we started the SISTAFUND fundraise in January officially, but it's been a few years that we're working with corporates on the fact that we're going to launch this fund, and we're working with them in order to convert into LP. So what's worked with me is just, I guess, again, building networks before when you don't need them, and also try to have fun on the subject. I don't really know how to say that, but the problem is that the numbers are so depressing, and the reaction in France are so depressing that at one point, if you just don't have fun and you don't twist the conversation, you're not going to get anywhere. So traditionally, like for 15 years, and I was partnering with a female founder as well. So we were 2 women, and we had 3 kids each. So it was like absolute catastrophe. And each time, of course, people asked us if we were together. Why not? But if it was a side business, at one point when we sold the company to Amazon, they called us 2 days before saying, "Hey, girls, we need to talk." So in general, when somebody says we need to talk, it's not a good thing. And we go there, we go to Washington, and we're like sweating like crazy because we think that it's going to be the end of our company. And we get it there, and the guys are like, "Do you want to build a company, or do you want to build an empire?" And we're like, okay. I don't think if we were 2 male founders, they would have said anything like that. So we had, and it's a true story, we had to yell, "I want to build an empire. I want to build an empire," which was absolutely absurd. So we just need to laugh about it, because if not, we're not going to go further.
It seems pretty patronizing. I mean, you're based in France. Now, from a European perspective, have you seen a shift in attitudes in the last few years?
Yes, totally. I mean, an amazing shift. It's a few years ago. So when we started the non-profit Sista, nobody counted. Of course, you need to count women in order for women to count. It's essential. If we don't have data, we're nowhere. So nobody in 2018 had any idea on the tag in terms of gender of their deal flow. Today, at least in France, and it's coming a lot in Europe and in the US, of course, since a longer time, you have tax, so people can't hide. They can't hide anymore, because now you know that this fund, they raised 600, and they only have 2% of female founder. I mean, and the great thing about numbers is that it puts everybody together on the same path, and you can't hide anymore. So I think there's a huge shift, especially in terms of numbers.
Jesse, tell me, what have you found?
I mean, I completely agree. We need to base all of this in the data, and I think data doesn't lie, like you're saying. Data speaks, and I think that's the most helpful tool we have, and it's not a man-hating club. We need everyone. I strive for equality, but at Halogen, we really look at diversity of age, race, and gender at the earliest stages. That's how we change a culture, that's how we change the world. And now there's so much incredible data from Dell, Morgan Stanley, all of the brands here, that they're collecting data on how diversity breeds success. Women raise half as much capital and double the return in a year less time. Women raise half as much capital and double the return in a year less time. I will let that sink in. That's referencing 3 separate studies, not just one. And I think that's something everyone needs to think about. We need allies. We need men who are pulling women in. We need to make sure that we have women on boards and at all levels. This is just so incredibly important.
What tips do you have for any founders who may be here when they come across perhaps a very cautious VC or a VC that's not really relatable to them?
Well, I think for any male or female, you get grilled, as a startup. And I mean, it happened to me the other day. This guy was telling me, he said, I hadn't even pitched yet, and he goes, "What is your investment period?" And I said, "We're deploying over 3 to 4 years." He said, "I don't think you know what that means." And I said, "No, we're deploying over 3 to 4 years." And he's like, "I don't think you know what that means. You just don't understand." And then I started pitching, and I said, maybe it's a difference of terminology. Maybe you're in real estate, maybe there's a difference in terminology. And I had to sort of take a step back and just be confident. And I said, this is my third fund. I had to pitch about 500 investors to close 85. I've answered that question a lot of times, but maybe there's a difference in terminology. So be confident, I would say, for the women. Men, I wish I had more of your confidence. I have to talk myself into it, and that's a female trait, and it's not a bad thing. It means we overanalyze, and overanalyzing actually makes you a much better investor. We take much more calculated risk than men do, but we need both of us because we also need that gambling gut check.
Tatiana. That's great. Tatiana, when it comes to finding a solution, a lot of the women founders I speak to say that they are over-mentored and underfunded. So what's been most helpful for you?
So I feel that it's the great answer to everything. Mentoring and coaching is just like the solution. You don't really understand why. Each time I go, typically in France, we have that kind of summit. Each time I used to go, and I used to go with my friends, they're male entrepreneurs, everybody used to go on me and say, hey, we have an amazing coaching and mentoring program, and I had already sold the company, and the guys next to me had none, but they didn't need coaching, I needed coaching. So I think that, of course, it's great to have all this mentorship and coaching program. I think that we don't need to be shown the way, we need the resources to get there. And at one point, if people would understand that, it would be great, but just I guess that entrepreneurship or venture is all about resilience, of course. You have 99% times that people say no, and 1% people say yes. 99% they slap the door, and 1% they say yes. So I think we just need to focus on this 1%. What's really frustrating in a kind of gender diversity and underrepresented subject is that the reasons why you're rejected are not the ones that are traditionally accepted. But anyways, it's of the tech industry. Look here, it's like Hunger Games. It's very, very competitive. So the idea is just that we need to find a way to focus on the 1%, and if the 1% says yes, it's a good thing.
And the last few years, there's been really important social movements. We've had Me Too. During the pandemic, we also had the murder of George Floyd, and there was a lot of talk about increasing diversity investments, and I was in the US at the time. Where are we with those initiatives? What sorts of progress have we seen? And we are meant to be joined by Jameson Hill, who leads an initiative in historic black colleges and universities. So I'd love to ask you more about what's next? What have you seen?
We have so much farther to go. I would say, women in the United States are only getting 2% of venture funding, and a new study just came out that it actually went down. And that's the bucket that we focus on is women. There has to be a female in the founding team of 5, but because of that, we have over 50% minority-led companies, and we think about those things at those early stages. And I would advise other funds. Do we have any venture funds out here? Any venture funds? How many startups? Startups? A lot more startups? I would advise more. Think about it that way. Get off of your normal path of where you're building your network. Get out there. New companies are being started all over the world, and it's so important to not just get stuck in the 10 investors that You need to get out there. I think as an investor, you have a responsibility to meet as many companies around the world as possible and to provide access to capital. We try to be super accessible. We're not untouchable. You can find us on Instagram, on halogenvc.com, on, we take pitches everywhere, and it's exhausting, but it's good. This is what you do. I don't want to miss the next Uber or whatever it is.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in terms of like different initiatives, we hear a lot from the US, but I guess SISTAFUND was also started as a solution to this issue. Are there any other examples across Europe or even globally that's dealing with this issue?
Of course, so we have like one non-profit organization that exists in 2018 and one fund that we just launched. But we see popping out like tons of great initiatives, especially in the upcoming, in the last weeks. There's Female Founder in Austria that just closed their first fund. There's Oxto in Berlin that just closed their first fund. There's Ada Venture that just closed their first fund. There's Gage Angel that deployed 750 million last year. I mean, there's a lot of initiatives that are getting out. And what's interesting between all these initiatives that I feel that there's a lot of sorority between them. And so I hope that we're not going to reproduce the old world. It's difficult, but I hope. And I feel that we exchange a lot between European venture funds and funders, and we try to help each other to raise, of course, more money, since we're very small for the time being.
Now, Jesse, Serena Williams, of course, shone a light on how less than 2% of VC money went towards women. I mean, there's even much less going towards women of color. What hopes do you have for funds like Serena Ventures and others like that?
Yeah, we work with them a lot, actually, and we've done quite a few deals with them. I'm a big fan of her business partner, Allison, and I think we need more funds like that. I mean, we need more women starting funds. We need more, all male VC funds pulling in female partners who have a different perspective. I mean, at our fund right now, we're focused on, we have an autonomous plane delivery company, but we also did a whole study on the future of family, because childcare around the world is broken, but childcare in the United States is definitely broken. What I've learned around the world is it's a lot better than in the United States. Childcare is just, there's no system, it's terrible. And so we're looking for opportunities to invest in for-profit companies that can actually make change, and that's a perspective that a woman brings. I think it's one of many, many examples. Women's health has been completely neglected overall. Even women's just like cardiology. Women aren't being taken seriously when they're having heart attacks. So I think we need everybody.
Now, this is a question for both of you. What interventions would you like to see to deal with this issue?
Do you want to go first? Intervention?
So what we did is that we convinced 350 French VC funds to sign a pledge that commits them to invest 25% in women as of 2025. So that was, and it came into a law, so we were very happy, because now they're really obliged to do it. And I think that at one point, if we have a total transparency on their investment in function of their data, and we have an objective that they're supposed to follow, it's a great thing. And especially in Europe, the public institutions fund 1 out of 2 funds, VC funds. So they have a huge impact. So if the public state said, hey guys, if you don't, within 2025, respect that kind of ratio, we won't give you public funding anymore. That's easy, and it's just the base, because we're a lot talking about the tech industry, but also entrepreneurship is the ladder to social mobility. It's the only way in order to kind of climb the ladder of social mobility. And the women and people of color have been totally put aside. So I think the state needs to step in and try to give guidelines.
I think the intervention I'm most focused on, that I wish we could figure out how to solve more quickly, that would really help too, is you can change the way business is done from the early stages, and then we're a venture fund, so we sit in between the early stage businesses and are investors. And so, these limited partners, institutions, endowments, we need a light shined on them. They're untouchable, and they are only deploying to the same VC funds. And that's not female or minority-led businesses. That's not any of those funds. And I think we need much more transparency at all levels of business. So if I could, ask something, let's figure out how to do that.
Jesse, Tatiana, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.